few examples behind this language. The idea of this masterclass began, I think, 5 years ago when I met with the person that made the posters from Takao and Akira, Sana. It was a really, really nice poster. And after meeting with her a few times, in that moment I lived in one place. In the first floor there are a coffee shop. I live in the attic and the coffee shop in the main floor, and for my job it's quite convenient. And one day, because I have a good relation with the owner, I begin to spend time inside the shop, find this. And now I put in the screen, but this is the third issue of the English version of the Spider-Man manga, made in 1970. I only read in one book about this comic, but I never see before that moment. And that was the moment that I understand that I like manga, I like anime. I was a small kid that grew, see my country, Haiti, Marco, Massinger,
this Batman series is a movie serial from the 30s in color and in the TV. The concept of something is only from 25 minutes. Batman and Robin fight against someone or something, and in the last 2 minutes, you see that Batman is near to death, something like that, until the next chapter. This is the cliffhanger system. They, in the 20s, 30s, and the 40s, they use this in the movie serial every week during because there are 2 movie serials in the 30s, not really good, and they try to do exactly the same. When this TV series was shown in Japan, the people are crazy with Batman. You need to understand one thing. Japan lost the Second World War in 1945, and between 1945 to 1952, Japan was not colony, but United States organized everything inside Japan. After the war, it was the only choice to change the situation and, in some way, the mentality. The emperor was not a divine creature, it's something mortal. They lost the war, and the only way to help this country was organize every step inside the society. But in these 7 years, Japan opened too many things outside the country. One thing was the comic book. Because the G.I. Joe, the soldier, carried with the comic, because the comics, these things, these dangerous things, because in the 50s, in the witch hunt, many people tried to destroy, was cheaper and easy to move. The concept of trade paperback or whatever, this is new. This is from the 20th century, even from the 21st century. But in the 50s, it's the only way was the comic book, this classic comic book. And the Japanese people begin to study English in the school, begin to understand English, and begin to read in English. And when when the first movies began to show in Japan, the people like, and when the first comic began to publish, the people like. In the same moment was when the TV is open. The TV in Japan was in 1953, and the first someone know was the first anime in the Japanese TV series, in the Japanese TV? Yes, exactly. This is easy. Astro Boy was the first anime show in the Japanese TVs, in the Japanese TV. In that moment was 2 options, the manga and some way the American comic book. And in the TV began to show many things, and one thing was Batman. And the people loved very much. Everything the people in Japan like, they try to translate to their culture. And Batman was the first thing. This is the Batman 180. And this is the first DC comic book that was adapted from Jiro Kuwata in 1966 from Shonen King 23 and 25. This is how look if the mouse help me, yes. This is how Jiro Kuwata adapt Batman. This comic look like an American comic for one reason, for 2 reasons. First, the author tried to change his style, but it's quite difficult. But his style is quite the original comic book. And the series is from 1966, the TV series, but in 1964, DC understand that they need to change the style of Batman, because in the 50s was a really horrible decade from the comic book. From Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man from the 60s. And Batman changed to a detective because the DC in that case, it's detective comic. Because the first comic book that Batman was shown was detective comic. In Superman was action comic, Batman was detective comic. And in origin, Batman is not a superhero. It's someone that tried to do the right things like a detective. The difference between a normal detective and Batman is they use this dress. And after 10 years, DC decided to change and return to the older times. What's the new look? The new look is the older look. They in DC use comic book artists like Neil Adams, Carmine Infantino, or Gil Kane was one of the best artists in that moment, and from all the comic book history. And when Kuwata adapted the comic, he copied exactly the same style. For that reason, if you read this is the only English adaptation of the Batman manga. Because the funny thing with that the comic was published between 1966 to 1967. And after that, and was official, not because there are pirate edition or something like that, no. Shonen King, the owner of the Shonen King, the magazine, told with the DC say, yes, we are very happy, please do whatever you want in some way. Was crazy, the collection was during they adapt 18 original comic book, 5 Batman issues and 13 DC detective comic issues. But between 1967 until this edition is from 2015, there are any recompilation of that in English. And the first in Japan was in 2003. Was one of the missing link of Batman, because there are in the books it's possible to read about the Japanese manga of Batman, but it's impossible to read. The main difference with this is the normal comic book is 24 page, and Jiro Kuwata adapt in normally 3 or 4 chapters. It's around 34, 38, 40 pages, because they use more page to show, because the style is totally different. That is the main reason. But the manga is really nice. He understands very well how work the character of Batman and Robins. They don't have, it's in black and white or in these 2 different colors, 2, 3 different colors, and look like a normal Batman. But during 30 years, anyone know anything about this comic? And I only read in 2 books that this comic exists. And 3 years ago, previews and DC offered for the first and the unique time, 3 volumes. And it's really nice to read, because it's to read something that look, it's older, but it's nice. Because the author understands very well how Batman works. And this is the good thing. Because, for example, in the manhwa, in the Korean Q, it's nice, but it's only an adaptation. The Japanese artist understand the character and use something, but he don't use the TV series. He used the original comic book, and this is really nice. This is one original cover from Shonen King. And this is the original comic. The original version is Detective Comic 353. But see how look Batman in Japan. It's exactly the same Batman you know normally in a normal comic book. is in my language, in Spanish. I suppose you know who is Kia Asamiya, if you like comic, if you like illustration. The face is the face of Michael Keaton, because Asamiya loved the Tim Burton Batman from 1989. And this is the second example of someone adapt Batman to the Japanese market. In that case, it's not like this is more easy to find. Sorry, it's in Spanish, but the edition is really nice. In that case, it's different. In that case, it's DC told with someone that like and love American comic, because Asamiya, for example, made 5 X-Men and Kang X-Men between 2016, 2020, and he liked the American comic book. In that case, this, I think, is original, is in 3 volumes in Japan. It's an excuse that Asamiya drew Harvey Dent, Two-Face, Edward Nygma, Riddle, Catwoman, Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin, and the Joker. Because the idea is, behind is some Japanese company create one drug, and if you take this drug, you look like the people you want to look. In that case, every crazy guy in Tokyo take this drug to look like a Batman evil character, something like that. But Asamiya know how to. And DC only say, please do something realistic, not do something extreme. But they are really different between this comic, because the cover is really nice. There are Japanese, English, Spanish, and German version. I don't know exactly why are German version, because the market is like, sorry, but I don't see, no. This have. Sorry for the inconvenience with the against. This is, for example, the different, as you see, this is Two-Face against Batman. Look really nice. Look like a real manga. The difference is the character. If you see, you put in one hand the manga from the 60s and the manga, in that case, this is from the 90s. They are really, it's a totally different style. It's exactly, I told you about the Avengers from Korea. This is like from the even 21st century. The manga from Kuwata is from the 60s and from the 20th century, when they used exactly the same for to make the page that the different. If you had the opportunity, because there are a few pages in internet where it's possible to read, please read, because this is really nice. Asamiya know very well how to do. And Asamiya understand how the Occidental people like you and me like the comic book. In the Batman, in the original Batman from the 60s, this is from the Japanese market. And the artist and the editorial create something from the Japanese market, not from outside. Now we have the opportunity to read, but this is created from Japan, United States, Finland, and Spain. And the last example is something probably someone know who made this. Oh, sorry. Now it's more easy. My idea is not to use this, but, well, I suppose I do not to introduce who is Katsuhiro Otomo. Oh, yes. You know who is this guy who made? Otomo is the creator of Akira. That was I do something similar like this in AnimeCon in July. And I remember to say that when I saw Akira in 1990s in Madrid, I saw in one chair like this, no, well, something similar like this, yes. One chair, small TV, and was a Japanese copy with Chinese subtitles. It was from Hong Kong. It's the only way in 1990s try to explain to someone in Spain that it's a good idea to buy the copyright of a Japanese animation movie like Akira. I think even today it's difficult, but in the 90s it's impossible. And I saw this movie one Sunday in the afternoon in a comic book shop with only one guy. And my feeling is exactly someone put inside a washing machine, and during 2 hours I stay inside a washing machine. Because when I go out, I really don't understand a thing. But for me it was, wow, what is this? I remember in the 90s, now all of us has internet. But when I was like you, someone, because between 16 to 24, that moment, because it's previous to the internet, the only way was the newspaper and the magazine. And the Japanese magazine are in Japanese and it's quite expensive, but the American magazine are quite expensive too. And I spent 5 or 6 years trying to find information about the Akira. I saw much more, and I have the opportunity to see in English, in Japanese with English subtitles, and read the comic book. But Akira was this guy. And in 1996, DC Comics published 2 volumes, Batman Black and White, Volume 1, and in 2003, the second, Batman Black and White, second volume, and offered to wherever do something. And because Otomo liked Batman, and Otomo speak and read English, make this. It's only 8 pages. But if you have the opportunity, please read, because it's really, really nice. This is the translation. In the 60s, someone made Batman exclusive from Japan. And in the 90s, very near to the 21st century, some Japanese author, Jo Duffy, Mary Jo Duffy, was the first translator that Marvel had in the 70s from Japanese comic. This girl understand, read, and speak Japanese, and she began to publish Japanese comic. She was one of the persons that published in Epic Akira in the 80s. And for that reason, and probably she was the person that called Otomo and said, do you want to do something with Batman? And Otomo made this. This is how the things changed. The original Batman in the 60s was only from Japan, and the Otomo and Asamiya was the other side. The American editor called to a Japanese author, now because the manga is quite famous, and offered the possibility to do something with one of the most iconic comic characters in the world, because Marvel have many, but when you work, and for example, if you move to the United States to talk with someone from DC, there are 3 characters, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Behind that, wherever, if you want to do something with these 3 characters, the first thing is you need to read everything. And you need to keep everything exactly in the right place, because it's impossible to change anything. Because it's the god of DC. And now DC offered to some crazy guy that Otomo to make Batman. Sorry. This is the Japanese cover of the first volume of Spider-Man, the manga. This is in Japan, and is here, flat. Please enjoy. And that was made in, well, this edition is from the 80s, from this century, from 2003. But originally was made in 1970, and was the first time that Marvel, because in DC sell the right to make Batman, but Marvel talked with someone in Japan and offered to do something with their character, because Marvel understand that it's a good choice to open the market to the Japanese guys. And they talked with Ryoichi Ikegami, the guy that made Crime Freeman, Sanctuary, and May, the Cycle Girl, and Ikegami make this series. The approach is in some way exactly the same. The thing is the character, and I put here the name. Yes. The difference is the character is not Peter Parker, is Yu Komori. But for example, that is something is nice because when Marvel adapt the next series that change the topic United States to Japan, the Spider-Man J was in 2004. They changed the name too. But in that case, no, they use exactly the same name, the Japanese name. There are English version. I show you this. The only problem with this series is that Marvel stopped before the series finished, because the series was published in between 1970 to 1971. Until then, they need to wait until the 90s. During 25 years, the series was only from the Japanese market. And when Marvel decided to publish, they only published 32 issues. And if you know Japanese, good. But if you don't know how the series finished. Because this Tracon is about horror. For example, the lizard or the bad character, the evil character in all these series look much more realistic and scary than in the American version. Because this influence, even Ikegami used, because they work with two different writers, they use, for example, one witch that they export to the Japanese mythology. Because it's something that they use, for example, in different adaptations. They always use something that normally in the American market, now with Vertigo, and in the 21st century, they use many things. But in the 70s and in the 80s, the horror movie are nice in the movie theater, but the horror comics, what not? Not only because the comic code, because the taste is totally different between the Occidental and the Oriental market. No. This is the next example. The Spider-Man. It looks very nice. It's fun. This published in 2004, 2005, between 2004 2005. It's in theory, from small kids. But the series is really nice. It's a mix between Spider-Man, Power Rangers, a Godzilla movie or something like that. It's fun and it's good for small kids, especially because The Spider-Man manga from Ikegami is from adult guys. It's like the Batman from the, or even the Asamiya Batman. This is from all kids, all age, but especially from kids. The only good part is, the only bad thing with this is when Marvel published in English, changed the name and used Peter Parker when the name of this guy is Shoamano. And they changed all the characters. The name of the character is the only thing I really don't like. They published in English, in the one collection, the name was Spider-Man Family. There are two volumes. The first is easy to find. The second is difficult and expensive. Because in the second volume, you see the one funny adaptation of the Fantastic Four. It's really nice to see. Yamakata is the name of the artist that made the screenplay and the page, how he adapted the Elektra, the Daredevil Elektra, and the Fantastic Four. It's really, really nice. This is one of the more difficult to find in internet. The other is possible to find internet without problem. Oh, at the first. And the more strange, difficult, and expensive things, if you want to see, is that. This is the Japanese version of Hulk. Was made in exactly in the same moment, 1970, 1971. There are not any English translation. I found one in United States and need to pay 165 euros for one volume, only from 25 pages. But it's really good. It's one of the best adaptations because they changed not too many things. Bruce Banner is a Dr. Aki. Their parent died in Hiroshima, but the idea is exactly the same. The problem with this comic is exactly the same problem with the Hulk of Ang Lee. It's too much oriental. If you compare with the, now Hulk changed. But in that moment, Hulk was Tarzan. Tarzan always say, I am Tarzan, you Jane, and you Cheetah, and Hulk destroy. Now Hulk have more way to move, but in that moment, no. There was a web page where it's possible to see a scan of this comic. I scanned 2 pages of my comic. Sorry from the quality, because that is the problem with the scanner and the Japanese. This is Dr. Aki. General Tal was exactly the same. And I like very much this page. Betty changed from Mitsuko, and see how wonderful page is that. I read some critique about this, and it's true. This look like Osamu Tezuka. It's not from Tezuka, but look like. The thing is, the same guy that draw the screenplay of Crying Freeman and Lone Wolf and Cap, it's the same guy that wrote the screenplay from this. And for that reason, it's really, really nice. I hope that someday Marvel decide to publish this, because for me, that my job is to try to explain these things, and when I finish these things, or I finish to write something, I hope someone want to read the comic I offer. For me, this is something, at last I suppose I begin to study Japanese to read this, because it's something you know that is in front of you, but you don't have the possibility to read. This is Pavit Prabhakar, the Indian version of Peter Parker. This comic was made in 2004 from Gotham Entertainment. I suppose you know what is Bollywood. Someone knows Bollywood is the more incredible place to make movies. But the Indian guys like to read comic too. The background of this series is quite interesting. There are some directors, if you like Indian movies, like me, you know some guy that's the name is Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray is one of the most important directors of the Indian movies. He learned, I don't know how many awards in his life. And he met with Stan Lee in the 70s in Marvel. And because this guy was a director, illustrator, music, he made everything like a Renaissance guy. And he liked Spider-Man. And in the 70s, that was the first approach. But this guy died before, and someone adapted the idea. In that case, it's really nice because they use the original background. They use the normal people, the normal name. This guy, for example, you see how they use the same shoes that some Indian guy used. They eat the same food. They go to see the same movies. They like Amitabh Bachchan, the great B, the more iconic artist in the Indian movies. And for that reason, this series is very nice. It's only 4 issues, but this is easy to find in internet and wherever. But it's really nice to see how the Marvel characters, like this, someone of here read Spider-Man, the classical Spider-Man. Because if you know Spider-Man, you know that this is exactly the same thing that someone made when Gwen Stacy died in 1974 in the Amazing Spider-Man 121, 122. It's exactly the same idea. Peter tried to hold Gwen, and in some way he killed Gwen. Not only the crazy guy that threw through the bridge, and this is exactly the same. Look like an Indian movie in a comic book, and it's quite fun. And the last example, because I only have 5 minutes, is that. If someone knows Spawn, Spawn was one of the first image collection, was created from Todd McFarlane in 1992. Spawn is a creation of evil, one of the soldiers of Malevolgia. It's the demon, whatever you want to ask. And in that case, it's exactly the same, but in Japan. In that case, it's not Al Simon. Al Simon is the original Spawn. That case is Ken Kurosawa, like the Japanese director. And he died. He returned like a soldier from the devil, but he don't like the idea, and he preferred to stay behind his sister. And the comic is really nice. There are only 3 volumes. The problem with this collection is they finish. This is a real, it's like Spawn. It's exactly the same. And the only difference with the original Spawn is, this is from 1998, 1999, is that they use, for example, the toys, the McFarlane action figure, to create character from the manga. This is one of the 3 volumes, or for you, please read. And it's really, really nice too. The only problem is when the 3rd volume finished, there are a big cliffhanger, and the editorial decided not to publish anything more. there are a few more examples. For example, there are new Avengers versus Zombies from the last year. But this is different like this because this collection was made exclusive from the Japanese market, like the previous. And for reason I don't really understand, because for example, I live in Helsinki, and in one shop that specializes in manga, in the shop they are comic, but normally they are manga, it's possible to see, for example, the manga Spawn, but the people that like manga normally don't read this. And for that reason I choose this topic, because for me it's the best way to offer things like, because the style is exactly the same. You see this, and if you see the manga, it's in exactly the same way that any manga. But normally the people put relation between the American market and don't see. It's like the Avengers. The Korean Avengers is in the same section that the normal comic book, but it's a totally different way to show. This is possible to find on internet too. I think everything actually is possible to find on internet. And I like to read comics in 3D, but I understand that it's difficult, it's expensive, even if you order, and the budget to buy comics, manga, figures, t-shirt, bag, is not enough. And because I know, because I have exactly, in my case, the problem is the space, not because they are, the problem is the space. But in that case, if you have the opportunity, please read all this collection, because when you finish, you probably surprised like me, because I spent the last 3 years preparing this master class. In origin was not a master class, was an exhibition. But I prefer to put in front of you and show, and because I have the opportunity to show the original comic, that is the best way. I think it's exactly 1 minute more. Sorry, I am a teacher too, and I try to keep this. I am not the teacher, I use the last minute. No, I try to keep the difference between one class and another. Thank you for coming. Thank for spending 45 minutes in front of me to hear how I say crazy things. And if you had the opportunity, when you return your home after tomorrow when this event finishes, because it's only today, Saturday, try to find the comic, because probably you enjoy very much. One thing, there are one chapter in one animation series, Batman, the Brave and the Bold, in the second season, in episode 25, there are an animation version of the Batman of Jiro Kuwata. It's really nice to see. And like usually it's possible to find in internet.